What's going on, WWE fans? You're watching The Ring Report, where the wrestling never stops. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's break it down. A heavy hush has settled over the Karaoke family, a dynasty that once filled arenas with its energy and pride. For decades, their name represented power, unity, and resilience in the world of wrestling. But now, that familiar roar of triumph has been replaced with quiet hospital corridors, soft prayers, and the heavy weight of uncertainty. What began as whispers online, missed appearances, unexplained absences, and fan theories has become heartbreakingly real. A family that once embodied strength is now learning, in the hardest possible way, what it means to be fragile. Their greatest champion, the man who carried their legacy into a new era, lies surrounded by machines and murmured prayers. For the first time, this family that taught the world how to fight is discovering the painful lesson of how to wait, to hope, and to face what can't be controlled. The whispers that became truth. At first, fans assumed it was all part of the show, another dramatic twist in an ongoing story. The absence, the silence, the cryptic messages from colleagues all felt like clever misdirection. But soon, the truth began to leak through the cracks. Behind the camera lights, the bravado faded. Family members, their voices trembling, admitted privately that something was very wrong. The world of scripted rivalries and predetermined endings had collided with real life. Those closest to him rushed to be near, to hold hands, to stand guard. The headlines weren't written for promotion this time. They were pleas for understanding and space. It was no longer about championships or contracts. It was about life, love, and the fragility that fame so often hides. The night they gathered. When the family gathered that night, it wasn't for celebration or ceremony. They came in quiet, as if entering sacred ground. Generations filled the small room, grandparents, cousins, siblings, each clutching tokens of memory. One by one, they placed photos at the bedside. A young boy with bright eyes and wild dreams, a rising star on his first tour, a father smiling with his children. The air was thick with stories and disbelief. The eldest of the family sat at the foot of the bed, whispering prayers in their native tongue, recounting tales of childhood, the barefoot boy who once practiced imaginary entrances, who dreamed of being the strongest, not knowing how much that dream would one day cost. The private struggle. No one saw for months. There had been signs, small, subtle, easy to overlook. Missed meetings, canceled flights. "I just need rest," he had told those around him. It was an explanation that sounded harmless, believable. But behind that calm tone was a man exhausted by expectation, burdened by the responsibility of being a symbol. He was the face of a brand, the heart of a storyline, the embodiment of his family's name. To admit weakness felt impossible. Pride and duty had always been his armor, and even as his body sent signals of distress, he chose silence. In hindsight, that silence speaks louder than anything, proof of how often strength is misunderstood as endurance rather than honesty. The world reacts. When the news finally broke, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Fans around the globe, people who had cheered, booed, and followed his every move, put aside rivalries and united in concern. Wrestlers from other promotions sent messages of solidarity. Former opponents who once battled him under bright lights offered prayers and respect. Hashtags flooded timelines. Candles were lit outside arenas. Posters read, "Stay strong, champion." For once, the world of sports entertainment dropped its walls and remembered its heart. This was not about victory or defeat anymore. It was about humanity. About a man who had given everything to the audience, now needing them to give back the one thing he had always inspired: hope. The blame and the questions. In the aftermath, conversations grew difficult. How had this been missed? Could someone have intervened sooner? The talk wasn't about pointing fingers. It was about understanding the pressures that drive people to hide pain, the cultural expectation of toughness that leaves no room for vulnerability. His story became a wake-up call, a reflection of how industries, families, and fans alike sometimes overlook the human being behind the icon. The questions were messy, but necessary. If anything good could come from such a dark time, it would be a collective promise to do better, to listen more carefully, to protect more fiercely, to recognize that no legacy is worth more than the person who carries it. The quiet acts of support. Amid the noise of speculation and media frenzy, there were small, almost invisible acts of kindness that spoke louder than any headline. Former rivals sent meals. Old mentors sat for hours in waiting rooms, saying nothing, just being there. Friends canceled appearances, choosing presence over publicity. Nurses whispered how the room never stayed empty. There was always someone holding his hand, telling him stories of the ring, of the fans, of the laughter that once filled arenas. These were not grand gestures, but human ones. The quiet kind that remind you that love often speaks in whispers, not speeches. The family's reckoning. As the days blended into nights, the Karaoke family began to confront something deeper than illness, a generational lesson about silence. For years, strength in their culture had meant stoicism, endurance, not complaining. But now the elders spoke through tears, admitting that real strength sometimes means asking for help. That lesson, born from heartbreak, became the beginning of change. The family resolved that whatever the outcome, his fight would not be in vain. They would redefine what it means to be strong, not as the absence of weakness, but as the courage to speak when you are in pain. Ritual, memory, and the long road ahead. As days passed, vigils continued. Fans around the world held candlelight gatherings. Musicians wrote songs. Entire communities prayed in unison. The story had evolved beyond wrestling. It had become a global meditation on love, loss, and resilience. In the ancestral village, a final ceremony was held at dusk. Children wore shirts with his emblem. Elders chanted his lineage. They weren't mourning a star, they were honoring a son. Whatever the days ahead would bring, recovery or farewell, the rituals grounded them, reminding everyone that legacies aren't defined by titles or trophies, but by the love people leave behind. Closing. What lives after the spotlight? In the end, the Karaoke family's story became more than a tragedy or a headline. It became a mirror. It reminded the world that behind every performer, every champion, stands a human being carrying invisible battles. It showed that greatness is not measured by how much one can endure in silence, but by how deeply one can connect, forgive, and inspire change. Whether or not the champion returns to the ring, his impact will remain. In the hearts he touched, in the lessons he left, and in the renewed resolve of a family, a sport, and a global audience to never confuse strength with silence again. When the music fades and the lights go down, what endures is not the spectacle, but the humanity that binds us all.